right. Hi, and good evening to everyone who may be tuning in, just coming in. I know there's some people are going to be joining us shortly. Welcome to Live with Hanifa Nayela. It's me, Hanifa Nayela. I have another really good conversations for you guys today. I know there are some people who was looking forward to this conversation. I, for one, was looking forward to talking to Brother Diallo. It was on my list of things to do. Brother Diallo, how are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yes, yes, yes. I appreciate you being here as well. I'm just gonna do some housekeeping real quick.
Take your time.
I'm gonna let. Okay, so if you want to subscribe, if you are new to the channel, if you're just coming in, you're watching it on the replay. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you want to follow me on my social media platforms, I'm really only on Instagram at the real Hanifa Nayela. And if you're feeling generous, and because people usually ask, my cash app is $ Hanifa Nayela. Feel free to drop some coins if you want to. Throughout the broadcast, I will be sharing Brother Diallo's channel as well. I think it's a channel that, if you're a Black person and you're about the liberation of your people, you
Oh,
should
thank
be
you.
following the brother and
Thank
having
you.
these conversations. I will say he will challenge your thinking, but that's okay. There's no growth without challenge. And so, Diallo,
Yes.
I wanted to have you on because this has been I was on a panel with a friend not too long ago, and we kind of touched the topic somewhat. And I know that you talk quite a bit about classism, capitalism, Pan-Africanism, celebrity worship. There's a whole lot of things that you talk about.
Right.
And so when I wanted to have this conversation, I couldn't think of anyone better to have it with because I'm just gonna be honest, you're slightly controversial. Um,
Gotcha.
and that's okay. I love it. And so I'm like, let me reach out and ask because I just feel like the conversation that I want to have about Black capitalism, I wanted to have it with someone who is not biased in their thinking around it. So again, thanks for being here.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I'm just gonna jump right in because I have some questions for you, and I'm sure others are gonna come up as we converse, as we dialogue. I'm sure some are gonna come up. So I have my notebook here so that I can jot those questions down.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. Let me pull up my. Okay, so Brother Diallo, if you were to define capitalism in your own words, not the dictionaries, if you were to define capitalism in your own words, how would you define it?
Um, okay. Oh, that's an easy one. But before I say that, can I just let the audience know we didn't coordinate our outfits? That's,
Oh,
I don't want people.
we did not.
We did not coordinate our outfits. This is pure chance. But now that that's out of the way, because I know that was going to be the first question of the night. But capitalism is essentially a system for concentrating wealth in the hands of the few. Capitalism is justified theft. Capitalism is the systematic concentration of the wealth of laborers and the natural world into the hands of a small elite group. That's all it is.
Okay, you said justify theft.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
No one, no matter how you value labor, no matter how generous you are in terms of valuing the work any individual does, no
Mhm.
one on this planet has done $1 billion worth of work. No one.
Mhm.
So if you look at incomes, if you look at the average McDonald's worker or the average minimum wage to low income worker, some mathematicians calculated that the average low to middle income worker would have to work 15,000 years to make $1 billion. The average upper middle income and middle income and upper class worker, um, like let's say the average lawyer, the average um, professor or teacher, they would have to work upwards of 10,000 years to make $1 billion. So
Mhm.
is Jeff Bezos, has Kanye West done upwards of 10,000 years worth of labor and work and effort in order to generate $1 billion? The answer is obviously no. So,
Okay.
how do you get rich? The only way to get rich is through the hyper exploitation of other people's labor. If you work for yourself and you're only measured by the income you generate, there is no way for you to become a multimillionaire or a billionaire, no matter how grand your work is, no matter how complex your work is, or no matter how much the general society loves and values what you do. The only way to become a multi-billionaire is through the hyper exploitation, is through taking the wealth other people produce, by taking the income generated by other people's labor and putting it in your account. That's the only way to become a millionaire. So that's justified theft.
Well, some people will ask, is that the same as outsourcing? When we hear people say they're outsourcing jobs, would that fall under justify theft?
Yeah, outsourcing is basically hyper exploitation. Before the system that gave birth to and preceded capitalism, which was the monarchical and mercantile systems, the king had all the money, and the nobleman and the king, they controlled, owned, and had the majority of the wealth. And they said they were able to rule because of the divine right of kings. What the divine right of kings was a fiction that barbarians made up to justify themselves from splitting other people's skulls and taking other people's shit. Can I curse?
Yes, please.
Okay. And taking other people's shit. But as the king, the kings were the barbarians. And as the kings accumulated wealth, they said, and as societies begin to become more complex, it wasn't as easy for the king to go bust other people in the head and take their shit. So they developed this nobleman. And noblemen were basically the king's henchmen. And then the noblemen would hire knights and mercenaries. And so that was the origins of the modern economic system we live in now, coming out of, Greco-Roman and into the European capitalist system. So they needed a rationale. It wasn't just saying, well, I'll split your head open with this club, or I'll run you through with this sword if you don't give me your shit. It became, the God has endowed me with all this money. It's like all these wretched kings from the past. Remember Kanye said, God is using me to show out? That's basically what they said. God's using me to show out. God, the reason I have this material wealth is because there's a blessing on high. And it was called the divine right of kings. And after a while, the people were like, this motherfucking monarchical shit is bullshit. Why should you rule over me? And then just because somebody swam in your testicles and you ejaculated into a noble woman, that person gets to rule my life too? Because of the divine right of kings, and you have generation after generation of wealthy people coming and telling my children what to do and telling my descendants what to do. So the Western, and this is all white folk stuff, Africans evolved differently prior to colonization, pre my office. So I'm giving an overview of the birthplace of, because people come, oh, Africans didn't. No, we didn't. Asia has a different path. So did the so-called Americans. But when the monarchs were overthrown, there's this new system. I'm going to skip over a lot of history that evolved from the divine right of kings, and it became the divine right of capital. And capital is the exact same as monarchy. The capitalist is the king. And it's fiction. It's not based in anything. There are printing presses. Every day, the United States gathers up billions of worth of dollars and puts them through a shredder. And then they print out more, And so what's behind the power of the king? I'm a nobleman. I have the divine right to rule you. But if you were like, I ain't really with that shit, and you live on my land, that is the king's land. If you kill that deer, that's the king's deer, and you have to pay taxes. And if you, first they would say, we're civilized, but because this is a monarchy. But soon as you effed up, here come the knight, here come the mercenary to beat the shit out of you, drag you off your land, kill you. Today, divine right of capital, I own that property you live in, even though I didn't build it. Donald Trump is a builder. He made his money in real estate. Would you let Donald Trump come and repair your toilet? Do you think Donald Trump knows how to do mason work? Can he do electrical work? You think he can lay pipe? You can ask his former wife. Let me not be cruel. But Donald Trump is not a builder. So how can he get $1 billion off of real estate while the people who literally built his buildings are on welfare and die in poverty? And then, but we can get more into that. So now you remember Beyonce said, I make so much money that my children's children will be wealthy. And by being wealthy, that means have special standing in the society, have an inordinate amount of influence and power over the society. So we just like the princes and princesses. So now we went from divine right of kings,
Mhm.
which was the superficial candy coating over brutality,
Mhm.
which the divine right of capital, which is
Okay.
again the superficial sugar coating over capitalism. So
Mhm.
all of these things, outsourcing, the gig economy, all of these things are hustles, scams perpetrated against the true wealth creators in order to justify the theft. You know, one of my favorite quotations of myself is profit is theft.
Mm.
Profit is theft. You hear people say all the time, capitalism is theft, because that's what they've been told by the capitalists. The
Okay.
capitalist media says, well, taxation is theft.
Okay.
Taxation is theft. But in reality, profit is theft. And you got working class people in awe of the profits that these corporations generate.
Mhm.
And that's like a slave in the field being in awe of the mountains of cotton that the slave master has generated.
Mm. the way you put that right there. That's why. Okay, so let me back up for 1 minute. I'm gonna take a pause because Diallo he came in shooting. Okay, so we're already here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that I shout everyone that has come in so far, so I can acknowledge you guys. Hey Ma'at, thanks for passing through, sis. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hey, just do it. He says peace at Hanifa Nayela. Thanks for joining the conversation. I have good brother Rico here. Thanks for passing through, Rico. We have Namdi, ex-revolutionary, passing through. Peace to you, brother. Let me see who else we have. I see Enya is here. Thanks for always supporting, sis. I appreciate you. Let me see who else we have. Make sure I catch everyone. I have Ene. Hey, Ene. Thanks for coming through. Rico. Yes. Brother Diallo is allowed to curse if that's the only thing that if that helps him to drive his point, because I need him to drive them today. So I hear you, brother. Next time you come up, you still have your limits, because you'll say a whole sentence with like 10 bad words in it. But okay. Wisdom bars. He says, let's go. Okay. Anyone else? I didn't miss anyone. All right. So Diallo, moving
Yeah.
on. Thank you for that introduction. Okay, can you please make the connection? Okay, first of all, is racism and capitalism connected? And if they are, can you please make that connection clear for us?
Racism and capitalism are connected.
Okay.
Um, and the connection between racism and capitalism is in this modern context. I like to quote Claude Anderson back
Okay.
when he was saying, when he said that racism holds Black people in place
Mhm.
while capitalism steamrolls over us. So
Mhm.
racism keeps Black people from fully actualizing our collective self interest through public policy, cultural norms, through, we all know how racism, institutional and cultural racism,
Mhm.
holds Black people into certain place, whether it's redlining,
Mhm.
whether it's devaluation of what little property we do hold, whether the systematic destruction of our intellect and our intellectual potential and capacity through menticidal practices as laid out by Dr. Biabi Wright. So racism holds us in place while, and as new economic opportunities and new economic statuses and standards come about. So
Mhm.
Black people at the time that we left the plantation and we went from being chattel to recognized as human, and we were finally on paper able to fully engage with the system,
Mhm.
the economy. That was the era of of industrial development.
Okay.
There was a building boom, there was a railroad boom, there was a fossil fuel boom, oil boom, coal boom, and all these various barons emerged.
Mhm.
And African people, descendants of Africa, were not allowed through economic policy to get the capital to invest. They were not allowed to work in certain developing. And then, just as, sorry,
Something happened.
just as
Okay.
uh, boom in the Reconstruction era was an agricultural boom, and then
Mhm.
you had the modernization under the Nixon administration, where agriculture it was industrialized and technological mass scale farms came. Black people were kicked off the land. So there have been several, and then of course the tech boom, where Black people talk about, oh, we need to close the tech gap, we need to close the agriculture gap, we need to close the fossil fuel gap, we need to close the shipping and container industry gap. You know, there was even a time where they were talking about, let's close the academia gap, there aren't enough Black professors, let's close, and all these gaps. So we're constantly playing catch up
Mhm.
with them. So that is the relationship under capitalism. There are other effects, but the economic impacts of, beyond the psychological, the cultural, the political, the economic impact of racism
Mhm.
is to hold Black people into their predetermined standing and status. And Black people in this economy, from day one, from slavery to now, our status in this economy hasn't changed. And that is to be a vulnerable, low cost source of entertainment, comfort, and economic growth for white people. That has been our status, and we've yet to escape that status, whether it's you work at Wendy's or whether you're Michael Jordan. Every Black worker or every Black earner within this economy, for every dollar any Black person makes under this system, white folks are going to make thousands more. So racism serves economically as in its economic role. There are several other impacts, but that's basically it. To keep Black people's vulnerable, to keep Black people from being a threat or any direct competition to the capitalist, and keep Black people from threatening the status quo.
So you made mention. You just said it doesn't necessarily matter how much the black person makes, right?
Yeah.
So we know that in black culture, there's a level of celebrity worship. It's this idea that one of us made it out. Are you saying that that's not necessarily true because they're still imprisoned by the same capitalist system? Is that what you're saying? No matter if they're a millionaire?
Uh, well, that's a little bit more complex to
Okay.
make it out. First, the only difference between the only thing that divides Black people in this country is consumption capacity.
Okay.
So Oprah Winfrey has a different level of consumption capacity than I do.
Okay.
Obama has a much higher consumption capacity than I do. So
Mhm.
does Dave Chappelle. So whether they're politicians, business people, or celebrities, the only thing that separates Black people is our consumption capacity on an economic level. So I am not going to stand here and say, well, I'm no different than Jay-Z, or my son is no different than Blue Ivy. That would be absurd, and it's
Yeah.
materially false. It's demonstrably false.
Mhm.
But when we do look at the divergence in what one person has as a Black person under the systems and institutions of white hegemony and capitalism, these individuals who have a lot of money and a lot of, I'm flying coach and you're flying private charter jet, you can do that. A good example of that is like Byron Allen.
Okay.
Byron Allen is a billionaire businessman.
Mhm.
He was an entertainer, but never really celebrity status. He didn't show up in the tabloids and get chased by paparazzi, but he went to buy an NFL team and had the money to do it, and they denied his bid. So, as a consolation, he went and bought the most expensive piece of real estate in the whole country. So, you, as a rich Black person, can buy anything that our oppressors are willing to sell you. But that's a serious caveat that
Mhm.
greatly limits your power. You have enough money to buy anything your oppressor is willing to sell you, meaning that anything that your oppressor wants to deny you is out of your access.
Mhm. Mhm.
So money won't get you that.
Mhm.
Meaning, let's say you want clean air, uncontaminated air.
Mhm.
That's not an option for you. You can maybe move, and here's a way to put it. And uh, But anyway, you can. There's certain things that money can't buy, and
Right.
I'm talking about love. What I'm talking about is institutional power,
Mm.
and you can't earn your way into that. You can't buy your way into it. And just like oppression, you can't buy your way out of oppression, and you cannot buy your way into power. But there's a lot of things that being powerless, oppressed, there's a lot of opportunities for any Black person to find relief. Or I'll say, it, this is what Black wealth is.
Okay.
Black wealth is a ransom.
Whoa.
Black wealth is a ransom that will provide you an amount of relief from the worst ravages of living under genocidal oppression.
Hmm.
That's what it is. And the more money you have, the more ransom you can pay to provide yourself a level of relief
Okay.
from the ravages of genocidal oppression. But that has its limits. And if you don't believe me, just go look at all the wealthy Jews that sat right next to the poor Jews on the cattle car.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, a ransom. I like how you put that. So you're saying the money can buy you a certain level of relief, but it's not. It don't necessarily protect you.
No,
Right.
it never has. First of all, Dale Jones
Mhm.
pointed out very astutely, African people were wealthier than those who colonized and enslaved us.
Facts.
So if wealth was a hedge against oppression, enslavement, genocide, we would have never been oppressed because Africa was wealthier. What resources and wealth did Europe have that was more abundant than Africa to this day?
Right.
To this day. And in fact, if you read such as William Bradley and other European historians and sociologists, they said the only thing Europeans had an abundance of above everyone else is aggression.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's it.
Mhm.
Hyper-aggression. They didn't have more oil, more gold, more wealth, more technology.
Hmm.
So,
Okay. Oh, go
so
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, and so wealth is not a hedge against that. If wealth protected you from oppression, we were wealthier than the people who enslaved us in the first place.
What do you say our relationship as a black collective, what has that relationship with capitalism been? Has it been a healthy one or unhealthy one? And if it well, I for me I know the answer, but what has that relationship look like? Because I see a lot of our people, they like recently we just had the whole high value man conversation for like
Right.
a whole year. Six figures was the number that everyone was using, and it's this idea that if you get this, then it puts you on a different level. So what, like mini capitalists, almost like we promoting people to be these mini capitalists. What has black people as a collective, our relationship been with capitalism? Has it been a healthy one or unhealthy one?
It's been unhealthy. In fact, Black capitalism is inversely proportional to Black communalism. And what that means is, as individual Black people have fiat,
Mhm, mhm.
more fiat, the less community oriented and community minded they are.
Why is that?
Well, I'm from the generation where I have in my life, I've borrowed cups of sugar, I've borrowed sticks of butter, I've borrowed eggs. I've been
Yeah.
sent around the neighborhood. And everyone I went to borrow, ain't nobody borrowing a cup of milk, because it ain't coming back. But
Yeah.
everyone I go to borrow those things from, they say yes, because they know whether it's the food stamps or their low income check, if it doesn't stretch the whole month, then they might have to come back and borrow back that egg and borrow back that cup of milk. And so Black people, as a survival mechanism, had to engage in what they called a underground economy or a alternative economy, or many immigrant populations and undocumented populations do that even to this day. So as Black people knew there was a certain level of interdependence and a certain level of coordination and cooperation that we
Mhm.
needed and that we had to exercise, we would understand that one of the worst things that could happen to you as a Black person is to run afoul of the community.
Mhm.
to offend the community to the extent that you were shunned by the community, because isolation meant you didn't have that support network.
Mm-hmm.
So as Black people begin to have more access and opportunities to integrate with the systems and institutions of white hegemony and white society, that dependence and that vulnerability lifted.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no incentive to maintain that communal structure and no incentive to um, to try to move it forward.
Okay.
So that's the main thing, that high levels of capital, because during pre-civil rights era, it didn't matter if you were Sammy Davis Jr. or Sammy Davis Jr.'s son, shoe shine boy. Both of y'all had to go in through the back. And you got to go in through the colored interest to sign shoes, and he goes in through the colored interest to perform at the marquee, the top performer. Sammy Davis Jr. would sell out venues and then couldn't even eat in the restaurant that he just sold out. If he was lucky, they let him eat with the servants in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
He would sell out a venue for a month and couldn't get a hotel room in the town to stay in while he was performing at sold out venues. He would have to go stay at a boarding house
Mm-hmm.
in the Black community. So even if you were the most famous, affluent Black person during the Jim Crow era, you still had to keep some level of organic connection and organic contact with the Black community. And capital rendered that essentially obsolete. So Black communalism is hostile to Black capitalism and vice versa.
Okay. So I'm going to take a quick pause here, and I want to make sure that I welcome everyone who's just walking in. I see the wireless woman, my sister. Hey, thanks for passing through. I see Simon Hectic peeping. Hi, Simon. Thanks for coming through. And I just want you guys to know, I am going to post Brother Diallo's um, YouTube page in the chat, so that you guys can go over there and subscribe to him as well. And also, I will be opening up the lines today. It is Open Panel Friday, and Brother Diallo gave me the green light. So I will open it in about 20 minutes, so that if you want to come up on the panel and have a conversation, or you have questions, or you want to challenge something that you heard Brother Diallo say, feel free. He said he is about that life, so I will be opening the lines. Okay, so okay, okay, does capitalism, we had this conversation not too long ago, right? And it was this idea that a lot of our people are aware of the parasitic nature of capitalism, but still want to participate in it, right? There's this idea of as long as I can get ahead, which I think requires a certain level of individualism. You kind of have to detach yourself from the collective to get to that point within the system of capitalism. So, my question for you, though, in a conversation I had, I wanted to ask you this: does capitalism require an underclass? And if so, what does that mean for black people living in a system of racism? And I know you don't say white supremacy. I think you say white hegemony, right?
Yeah, right hegemony. They're not superior. Cancer cells have the capacity to kill healthy cells, but that does not mean they're superior to healthy cells.
Okay. So do you think that capitalism requires an underclass?
Absolutely.
What does that mean for black? Because earlier in the conversation, you talked about racism. When I asked about the connection between racism and capitalism, you said racism kind of keeps us in place. And I feel like we're going to expound on that with this question, because what is that place? So if it requires an underclass to function, what does that mean for black people living within a racist system?
Well, it means those black people who seek to reach the level of hyper consumerism, or the top consumers amongst our race. It means that they have to ally with and coordinate and cooperate with the white elites.
Okay.
So if you look at Rick Ross, which just found that his restaurants, he was being celebrated for being a restaurateur, and you saw that he was underpaying, not providing safe work conditions, and engaged in wage theft. And wage theft is essentially when you're working for a company and they're pocketing the wealth you generate. And when you get up in the morning to go to work and you drive and commute to work, and even though you're working on behalf of your employer and they don't pay you, wage theft is the top form of wealth. You'll notice in the media they showing poor people running into the Apple store snatching iPhones, and they'll show poor people, a bunch of poor youth running into a convenience store snatching candy bars that have like a 1,600% markup rate, but they never show you the obscene rampant theft that happens by multinational corporations and the wealthy elite. So
Mm.
those black people, and whether it's Rick Ross, or remember Beyonce and her Ivy Park was manufactured in sweatshops. They were often talking about wealthy black people investing in private prison corporations. Many of our wealthiest so-called hood um, moguls like Puff Daddy, Ice Cube, 50 Cent coordinate and support the Republican Party. Even far back as Eazy-E went to the White House to meet George W. Bush because of tax cuts, and they're incentivized to support far right wing policies that continue to facilitate the concentration of wealth amongst the wealthy 1%. So basically, yes, it what it means is if you want to join the massa, you
Mhm.
have to turn in other slaves. You have to join, you have to adopt the master's mentality, the master's agenda as your own. You have to embrace the oppressor's methodology. There are no good capitalists. There are
Okay.
no honorary capitalists. There are no honest capitalists. You know, to be honest, there are no hardworking capitalists. You know, so understanding that, black people who want to get that status, you know, it's always, I mean, at the height of slavery, there were black people who were much more comfortable than the average slave. Under colonialism, there were black people who lived in mansions right alongside the white people in South Africa and Zania during apartheid. Yeah, you can get it. The bag is there if you're willing to do what it takes. If you're willing to let God use you to show out, you can get that paper. But God using you to show out don't mean that you're doing good things. God using you to show out is you being willing and eager to sell out your race and to exploit oppressed and suffering people around the globe as the white capitalists are.
What do you think about the pull yourself up by the bootstrap? Because you just said something. You said there are no hardworking capitalists, and what I realize is that people who are, I don't know, at a certain place in the hierarchy, and this includes Black people, look at people who are poor. Even
Mhm.
though we say that capitalism requires an underclass, we still look at poor people and say they're poor simply because they're not hardworking. And my response is some of the most hardworking people I know are people who are poor. They are walking 2 to 3 jobs. What do you say to the whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps
Well,
narrative that people put out there? Go ahead.
when that phrase first entered the lexicon, it was meant as a mockery of, it was meant to mock the very notion that poor people, all they have to do is work harder. It's like, so if someone come and say, "Oh, you're poor, you should just work harder," and then you would look at them and say, "What do you want me to do? Pull myself up by the bootstraps?" That
Mm,
used to be a term to dismiss the very concept that you could work your way out of poverty, or you could work your way out of your social class.
okay.
That's what, but it evolved to people started meaning it literally, meaning that you could literally do the impossible. You can't pull the physics, gravity itself prevents you from pulling yourself up by your bootstraps because your bootstraps are right down there with you,
Hmm.
you know. And it really, if you're just tugging at your bootstraps, you're pretty much working hard to stay in your place.
Mm,
And if you're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, it's the same concept as doing nothing. So that is the American mythology, though. It's called the Johnny Appleseed myth, saying that America is a place that if you come to and you're willing to work hard, then the world is your oyster. There'll be no limit to what you achieve if you're willing to, number one, be frugal in how you spend your money, be enterprising, meaning that you're willing to have a brilliant idea and make whatever sacrifices or endure whatever hardship required after you have that brilliant idea. Those two things alone, and you can make it in America. And then we go and look at Jay-Z and say, wow, he came from Marcy Projects and he made it.
Mm-hmm.
Did he make it because he worked harder than everyone else?
Mm.
How and why did Jay-Z make it?
Mm.
And we never see the millions of people who start a business, who wake up at 3 a.m. and go to bed at 1 a.m. every day. The people who literally work themselves to death because they bought into a stupid notion that wealth in this country is a byproduct of perseverance and frugality. That it is a lie. It's just like a pimp telling you, you turn enough tricks and I'll let you go. But the reality is, the prostitute that turns the most tricks are the one he most aggressively holds on to. There was also another a lie at the Auschwitz concentration camp that stated that hard work will set you free.
Mm.
But that was the freedom. That freedom was the cold embrace of death, where literally 99% of the bag chasers, the people who are willing to do whatever it takes, rise and grind. They get their reward, milk and honey in heaven, because that is literally a death stop. There is no physiologist. There is no neurologist. There is no trained healthcare professional that understands how the mind body interact, how the mind and body coordinate to make a person a functional human being. Will tell you that everything that they say you must do in this rise and grind culture is contrary to the average psychologically balanced person's well-being. This shit
Yeah.
literally kills people.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
only hear the success stories.
Yes.
We only hear the success stories, and even the people who fail, they fucking lie.
Mm.
You have a lot of these people who's like, yeah, I grind, I do this, and they don't want to acknowledge failure. So they will, especially nowadays, it's easy to give the facade of success and the facade of profitability.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know,
What,
so
what what do you say to people who believe that poverty is a mindset, and the issue with a lot of black people in America is that they have a victim mindset, which is keeping them at the bottom. When other black people say that to you, or a black person says that to another black person, poverty is a mindset. The reason why you're where you're at and you're stuck is because you have a victim mindset. What do you say to that? In Since we're talking about capitalism, we can connect it back to that. But what do you say to that? Because it grinds me when people say that. I'm just like, what? What do you say to that? I'm sure you've heard it, but yeah, what do you say to that?
well, the first thing I would say is that the historical record and the evidence does not back that up.
Mhm.
We know that poverty is not a product of one's mindset. It is a product of targeted policies, just like wealth is. I mean, it's not. So um, I would say that if we look at the historical record, if we look at the stats, that just doesn't play out in terms of the poverty mindset. In terms of the victim mentality, there's also no shame in being a victim. The
Okay.
shame is on the victimizer. You notice a lot of talk about victims and what victims should do or shouldn't do. We never talk about victimizers. So anybody that talks about the uh, victim mentality, because if I've been victimized and I'm aware that I've been victimized and I'm being victimized, and if someone comes to me and say, well, bro Diallo, you are not a victim, or what's the most appropriate thing to do if you don't have any interest in helping that person, is to leave them the hell alone. But if someone says, well, I'm a victim, and then they describe to you how they are victimized, then you say, well, this doesn't really have any merit. You know, there's nothing to support it. So, but there's no such thing as a victim mentality. Um, there are victims. There's no shame in being a victim. All the shame rests on the victimizers, the predators. You
Mm.
know, so I'm really not sure why even black people entertain, especially that victim mentality, and Another thing that it is delusion. So if you are abusing me and I don't acknowledge the abuse, then I'm not free of the victim mentality. I am trapped in self delusion. So the victim mentality doesn't exist, but the delusion of the victim who refuses to acknowledge their victimization exists. So most people who say that are not calling out your mentality, they're showing their own delusions.
Okay. Some people would say, Brother Diallo, that there are immigrants of color who come to this capitalist society and they fare just fine,
Yeah,
and use them as a metric for use them in comparison to Black Americans. So then it becomes a thing of what's wrong with y'all because these people of color come from impoverished countries into this capitalist system and they fare just fine. What do you say to that?
I would say to them, wherever you're from, Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica,
Hmm.
Panama,
Hmm.
go look at the economic statistics and the status of the African Americans that migrated to your country. So the average Black person living in Ghana is more educated, more affluent, and more economically prosperous than the average person in Ghana. The average Black person in Jamaica. Black people go from the United States and that migrate to Jamaica are living in villas. They're not living in the shanties and the slums.
Hmm.
So that is the nature of immigrant populations. You do not control, you do not compare. It is not fair to make a person-to-person comparison of a uh, um, citizenship born citizens versus immigrant populations because wherever you go, I have two people that I know. I wouldn't call them friends, but I have two people that I know that have recently migrated to Mexico, Black.
Yes.
One retired from the military, and the other one was a STEM professional.
Okay.
And they are wealthier, more educated, and more prosperous than the average Mexican.
Mhm.
And how much sense would it be for those individuals to sit down in Mexico and look at the over 1 million African people who live in Mexico, over 1 million Black people
Mhm.
who live in Mexico and say, well, I come to Mexico and I'm living prosperous. What's
Mm.
wrong with the native Black Mexicans? I migrated to Ghana after retiring and I'm doing quite well in Ghana. What's wrong with the Ghanaian people that they can't? I moved to Mexico, to Jamaica, and I'm making, and you try to invalidate all of the history and the valid grievances of that native population. It is people who are very stupid and people who have not traveled. So that is another divide and conquer
Yes.
status. Thankfully, most of the immigrants I know and that I had the privilege of being friends with, they don't fall for that. They
Mm.
don't really fall for, well, I'm doing well. What's wrong with the Black Americans? And for most of them who do have that, fallacy in their head, um, they can easily, often I find, can be explained what that condition is. And finally, if we look at the wealth and prosperity of immigrants, statistically, we find that it doesn't last more than 2 generations.
Hmm.
By the time they're here in 2 generations, they generally acclimate to the society.
The society.
So, they come here, I'm going to work hard. I work 3 jobs. And maybe their children won't, but their grandchildren are going to behave like every other Black person. And
Hmm.
many of you'll find a lot of immigrants saying, like they say about what's wrong with Black Americans, they often find themselves as what's wrong with my grandchild? What's wrong with my child? As they get in the groove and their
Yes.
children become subjected to the mental omnipresent racism that is to be a Black person in the United States. You know,
That's
so
very true. You would hear them say it. Oh, they're Americanized, you know?
and so like, what's wrong with your grand? Say if they say, well, what's wrong with America? I came here with nothing and I'm rich. Say, what's wrong with your grandson? I know affluent, I know affluent immigrant, Black immigrants, very wealthy, whose children are in jail, whose
Yes.
children are addicted, whose children have no ambition. What happened to your ambition? And let me not play, but it happens. I'm
Yes.
sympathetic to that because they have been subjected to the system.
To the
You know,
system. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
never see a racist cop run up on somebody and say, "Halt, you Nigerian," you know, "Halt, you Ghanaian."
Yeah.
They like, "Stop, nigga."
Mm-hmm.
Or as John
Mm-hmm.
Henry Clark said, the racist cab drivers are the most Pan-African people, more Pan-African than the average Pan-African black person, because the racist cab driver don't care what your nationality is. If you black, he ain't picking you up. I know that's a bit of a obsolete term. That's back
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s when black people were having all this trouble catching a cab in
Mm-hmm.
New York. That was a big thing about, the cabs not refusing. You have a black man in a Brooks Brothers suit and you have a white boy in a torn Charles Manson t-shirt, and the cab will go around the brother to pick up the white dude in the Charles Manson shirt. So, they see us all the same, where we like to play up these imaginary divisions.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah, that's
I
the nature of oppression. But, and to be fair, there are black Americans
mhm.
who travel abroad and
Yes.
talk that same bullshit, you
Mm.
know, and both sides are wrong.
Oh, okay. Let me just acknowledge Iyapo. Peace to you, Hanifa Nayela. Peace to you too, Iyapo. Thanks for coming through. Um, Brother Diallo, what are your thoughts on the creation of black wealth through black owned banking and entrepreneurship and patronage of black businesses? So, in other words, buy black, bank black. That was a whole movement that happened. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, um, I think it's all bullshit.
Do tell why.
Okay. Buy black is essentially obsolete. The Buy Black campaign goes all the way back to the 1920s, and it was actually started by a revolutionary. No, excuse me. Um, I had some barbecue tofu and potato wedges before you called. Uh, street food, man, I got to get it together. Anyway, so Carlos Cooks
Mhm.
is the father of not only Buy Black, but the Black is Beautiful. He held the first Miss Africa pageant and things of that nature. Um, that was during the height of Jim Crow era, pre civil rights, pre civil rights reforms, and pre integration policies. Now, Buy Black and pro blackness in general, the bar is too low. I'm not saying Buy Black is. I I'm not saying Buy Black is necessarily negative. It
Mhm.
just doesn't have any discernible impact on the collective status of African people. First of all, too few Black people are in business for Buy Black to have any to rising tide lift boats.
Okay.
And then Buy Black, there is too wide and disparaging range of ideologies and agendas and values amongst Black people for Buy Black to significantly positively impact Black people and our interests and agendas. So if you are going to want to have some type of um, what do you call praise, or you want to have some type of effort to promote black dollars or black resources remaining within the community, you have
Mhm.
to go further than black, because black is inadequate.
Mhm.
Because okay, I go buy a White Lives Matter t-shirt off the internet. Am I buying black?
Right.
I go buy or download a record that's calling black women bitches and hoes and encouraging the mass murder of other black people. I'll kill your whole family. And it's a black CEO, mogul, black record label, black artist. Am I buying black?
Mm.
So
Okay.
simply buying black is inadequate. You can say buy Pan African, or I support buy or support cooperatives, black cooperative economics. So
Mhm.
that way, you know that the resources that you're trying to circulate within the community are going towards the correct individuals and will be oriented towards the appropriate values and the appropriate agendas for the community. If I buy black, if I go to the Nation of Islam and I get a Scientology uh, valuation, what they call editing, they go test I pay the Nation of Islam to test me for theons. Am I buying black? So
Mm.
blackness is too dispersed, wide, and buried for that to be something. It is a start. As Garvey said, he said race first. He didn't say race only. Or as what's that sister's name? She said, "I'm rooting for everybody black."
Issa Rae.
Right. So if you root for everybody black, does that mean you have to root for Obama in his illegal overthrow of North Africa?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to root for Kanye in his efforts to support the MAGA movement and even Christian evangelical right?
Mm-hmm.
So black is beautiful, black is necessary, but black is inadequate as a rally point or a rally cry. It should be at the core of what we rally around. But if there are not additional conditions applied to buy black, all we are doing is elevating a trader class. All we're doing is promoting and advancing traders who are allied with our enemies against our interests. Buy black is inadequate. And at this point, it's more of an exploitation and a scam than it is a rally cry that we can viably organize around.
So if we were to subscribe to Garvey's Race First,
Yes.
right? How do we be race first and navigate what you just said? Because I guess I'm trying to differentiate the two. Because in one sense, you're saying that, because I agree with you. I've always said if someone is feeding our people poison, just food, you serving chitlins and whatever else, that's all your restaurant sells.
Right.
I've always struggled with, yes, they're black, but me as a person that don't eat those things, I can't support that business because somebody would say, well, you could just donate. And it's like, no, because I feel like they're pumping. For me, that's like donating to the drug dealer on the corner. You're pumping poison into our community. So I agree with you on that part, but I guess it's almost trying to understand, like, how do I reconcile the idea of race first while still saying, yeah, not because being black isn't enough. The black piece isn't enough. I guess I'm trying to understand how those two can exist alongside each other. I don't know.
Well, as I said, many people confuse race first with race only.
Okay.
Meaning that race first suggests that there's second, third, or fourth, and on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
If it was race only, I would not support it because race is absolutely significant. I could even accept an argument that race is the most significant component in the struggle. When I was out here sniffing around, looking for a spouse or just someone to date, it was race first, Think of it that way. So if I'm like, well, even if I'm not ready to settle down, I just want somebody to kick it with. To me, it's race first.
Okay.
But there's other components.
Okay.
Let me not even try to be righteous. Aesthetics, the shape. But there are other things. Their mentality, their outlook, their value system, hygiene, proximity. So if you're looking for a spouse and you're race first, you could end up in a horrible situation.
That's true.
A very horrible. You could end up worsening. If you be in some instances worse if you didn't have a race at all. You didn't factor race. So race first is inadequate. Okay. It's good. It's appropriate. It's necessary, but it is also inadequate.
I got you.
So we have to have additional standards and requirements. So race first. I say ideology second. So race first, that allows me to support Kanye. If I say ideology second, that no longer allows me to support Kanye.
Okay.
So it's race first, ideology second, agenda third.
Okay.
I say race first. Oh, I can donate to Umar's school. Ideology second. I can donate to Umar's school because he's the prince of Panama. He is my prince.
I already know where this goes.
But when you think of agenda, what is his agenda? Right-wing patriarchal blackness. Then that knocks. He hits two. He misses out on the third. So race first, ideology second, methodology and agenda. I know. I'm skipping race first, ideology, Agenda.
Agenda.
Third is methodology. So
Mhm.
race first. Let me think of somebody who hits those first three. Now, I'm gonna just make up a fictional person. I don't really know anybody.
Okay.
So race first
Hmm.
is a brother who is black,
Black.
African
Uh-huh.
descendant, anywhere in the world. He was born on the African continent. He is
Hmm.
a descendant of African slaves anywhere in the Caribbean. He's a
Hmm.
black man in Brixton. He's a African Baptist from Nova Scotia. Race,
Hmm.
it don't matter. If you black, I can rock with you.
Hmm.
Ideology, he's a Pan-Africanist, a socialist. Uh, Agenda, his agenda is the liberation of all African people and the reunification of the African continent and the expulsion and erasure of Africa's borders.
Hmm.
I can rock with that. I say, what's your methodology? We're gonna sit and pray and meditate until it happens.
Mm.
you know, we're gonna do it through nonviolent appeal to those and to the UN. Or we're gonna go out right now with machetes and chop up every, Westerner we can get our hands on. I'm
Mm.
like, okay, got me on those. So it's I say this: revolution is an intellectual endeavor.
Mm. Okay.
So race first allows for you to just turn everything else off. It's simplistic. It's relatively easy to apply, but it's inadequate. So it's race first, not race only. I am race first. I am not race only. Just because you hit the race, you check the race box, there's many other things that can get you knocked out the box to where I can't support you as a person, can't support your agenda, can't support your movement, and I can't identify you as an ally or an asset.
You just helped me to clarify some things, because when you break it down like that, I was talking to a sister of mine earlier, and we were having a conversation about black people trying to work together with different belief systems. And she was talking about, like, diehard Christians, and she was saying no, that person and I can't work together. And I was like, well, what if you guys want the same thing? But I think you list in methodology as well. That's where that makes a lot of sense, because I think for my sister, she was trying to communicate to me, this is where we part ways. This is where we part ways. Everything else could check off. That person could be raised first, their ideology, maybe. I even think it cuts off at ideology, because she's a Pan Africanist, and she was just like, no, a lot of it is the religious parts of these people is what stops me from working with them. And I think what you just identified was ideology. So you helped me to clarify that, because I just had this conversation earlier. Um, Let me see. So, first of all, let me let you guys know I am watching the chats. If you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll bring it up. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep asking Diallo questions. Diallo, so being that after everything you've said about um, capitalism, is it possible to use it as a tool of liberation?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
That reminds me of this meme. Absolutely not. I need. There's this guy my wife watches on Instagram. He makes these funny videos. Absolutely not. I want to slam my book and turn this. Absolutely not. No. I mean, capitalism doesn't even help white people. I mean, no. That's no. Absolutely not.
Okay. So that's out of the question then.
No. Well,
So
first, when you are able to identify what black is, what black capitalism is, it's not. It's just a myth all around. Black capitalists don't even exist. Black
okay.
people with capital exist. We got more of them than we need, to be honest. Black people with capital is different than black capitalists.
Can you tell me what the difference is?
A black person with capital
Hmm.
is Obama, is Byron Allen, is that one Negro they trying to lock up that paid all everybody's tuition at Morehouse. It's Bill Cosby.
Hmm.
A capitalist is a person who owns, controls, and directs the means of production. So you would have to find me a black person who has uh, has full control and sovereign control over basic resources.
And the example you gave of Byron Allen, you're pretty
Mm.
much saying that white uh why the system of racism won't allow that to happen.
Not yet. They might do it. They make a liar out of me all the time. So if we wake up tomorrow And they gave so, but at this juncture, at this form, because if you look at the history of Black people under white hegemony and white domination, there
Mm-hmm.
have been openings made from the first Negro who was able to read a book to the first Negro who became president. What
Mm-hmm.
the system often does to keep us from losing total faith in ever having any real status in this system is it's called trickle down achievement.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows about trickle down economics,
Yes.
but trickle down achievement is basically white people will deny us something sometime for generations and then give it to us. And the things that they denied us didn't really mean shit in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have whole generations of Black people that spend all this effort and energy to achieve this Black first. And then when they once they achieve this Black first, it don't change or mean shit. And it's not just the first Black president or the first Black NFL coach, or the first Black Wimbledon champion or the first Black CEO of a Fortune 500 or the first Black billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And so we expend all this energy trying to reach these integrationist achievements
Yes.
that they were denying us. So I have someone who I am abusing and exploiting. Let me try to break it down to a much simpler. Let's say I have a son in my home
Mm-hmm.
and I severely abuse him. And I can abuse him all day and deny him adequate food and water. And then one day when he's like, I've had enough of this, I give him some fresh water and some good food. And that calms him down just long enough for me to go back to abusing him. But
Mm-hmm.
then after he becomes somewhat accustomed to the fresh food and the water, he's like, I'm still being abused, and this fresh food and water is not proper compensation for the abuse I'm under. So I'm like, hey, here's a shiny new toy. And here's a new sweater. And he's like, wow, this sweater. And then that deflects his focus.
Okay.
And then, so each step of the way that as I'm abusing and exploiting this individual, I can give them a concession or a token. Black women just lost a major right
Mm-hmm.
in their right to abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But in exchange for that, they got a Black woman on the Supreme Court who is essentially a lame duck. She's outnumbered 6-3. So
Mm-hmm.
every legislation that comes before her opinion on it is all but irrelevant. Same thing for the Black woman in the vice presidency. So that's what that achievement is. It's another method or methodology or tool in our oppressors' ability to control us,
Yeah.
because we keep closing these gaps and trying to get these achievements, when if we take a moment, we'll find that it's not something we should have wanted in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I have another question, but I want to make sure I get the question from the viewers. Guys, I'm going to be opening up the line as well. I'm going to put the link in, so feel free to come up. But we have our first question from Wisdom Bars. He says, out of the 4 categories, are there any of them that you would let slide? Let's say race first woman whose agenda is in Black love, yet her methods are intersectional. Could you rock with her?
Only if the intersectional methods serve the interests of Black people above everyone else. Now, when you say methods are intersectional, I'm not fully clear on what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes, at times, as John Henry Clark said, there are no permanent interests, but there are always permanent allies. So if we are trying to advance the interests of Black people, such as in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
we worked with state legislator, shout out to our Representative Ford, to get a moratorium on the death penalty and to have other bail reforms and tort reforms and have stricter penalties for policemen who violate the civil and human rights of residents and citizens of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many. It was really an intersectional thing, because the police harassed and commit atrocities against Black people, against immigrant populations, against against poor people, even poor whites. So that is a particular agenda where we can form alliances, as long as we know that our interests are are first and foremost. So I'm not really sure if a black love intersectional methods.
Okay.
So yeah, I would stand next to Antifa in an ACAB shirt to get this particular widespread reform. But when it comes to specific um, black specific legislation such
Mhm.
as reparations, there ain't nobody else getting in on that. That's not something we can huddle up against with other parties. So some policies and some agendas and issues we can huddle up with and coordinate and cooperate with people from outside our race. Others have to be black exclusive.
Okay.
So yes and no.
I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna get through the questions, and I have some. I'm gonna ask a question about some other stuff, but my ad wants to know. Can you explain your thought process on generational wealth in our communities? You know, there's a push, there's a big conversation for the last maybe 2, 3 years about that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think black people have to appropriately define what wealth is.
Okay.
Wealth is not the abundance of fiat. Wealth is the quality of the water, the quality of the land, the quality of your social and familial relationships. That's what wealth is. And we have to cultivate and preserve that over generations.
Mm-hmm.
What fucking difference would it make if your child had a flash drive with 1 trillion Bitcoin on it, if the water he drinks is radioactive, if the land he's living on is infertile, there are no more whales or walruses or tigers on the goddamn planet? What difference would it make if he had 1 trillion Bitcoin on a flash drive?
Mm. Mm.
So I support generational wealth, but generational wealth is being connected to our ancestors and cultivating a path for our descendant. It is not amassing fiat and enough fiat to where we're in a position where we can invest that fiat in the hyper exploitation of other people. So it kind of saddens me that so many black people have gotten caught up in this notion of generational wealth. Every black woman on this planet has dioxin, one of the most toxic fake substances that has ever been invented. Every single black woman on this planet has dioxin in her breast milk. We couldn't say that a few generations ago. Every black child is going to be born with microplastic in their bloodstream and toxic particles inhaled in their lungs. So, and there's going to become a time where elephants are going to be as gone, where we won't have a rainforest, where the oceans will be depleted of life. And we're talking about amassing fiat. What the blood clot? I mean, seriously, like
Yeah.
that talk of generational wealth to a planet that is losing the life sustaining capacity. Allow me to say that again. This economic system of industrial capitalism is destroying the life sustaining capacity of the planet Earth. We are under the sixth mass extinction.
Mm.
And you will think generational wealth. What the fuck is that going to look like? Your child having enough money to buy a ticket on Elon Musk's Mars ship?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it really sickens me that wealth as a concept has been so warped to think that wealth is being able to amass. And it used to be gold or silver, and then it came fiat dollars, but now wealth is is bits on a computer, zeros and O's on a silicone chip. And as the concept of wealth, the abstract concept of wealth and currency and money becomes more abstract, the more we neglect and the more we devalue real wealth,
Mm.
clean
Mm.
air, pure water,
Mm.
fertile land.
Mm-hmm.
That should be it. Is generational wealth say, well, will the environment be cleaner when my grandchild is born than it is now? Will there be more vibrant life in the ocean when my child is born than there is now?
Mm-hmm.
Will there be more acres of rainforest on the earth? Will there be more biodiversity on the planet Earth when my child or grandchild is born than I have now? Because if the answer to that is no, and currently it is no, no, no across the board, there's no fucking such thing as generational wealth, and you need to shut up about it. Not
Mm.
you, Maya, personally, but those who talk that bullshit. It really sickens me.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell. Bonnie Turner, Lord Allah, peace to you. I wanted to make sure I acknowledge you coming in. We have another question from Wisdom Bars. He says, with capitalism still being so strong, where do you see the community and the world in 10 years?
I think the status quo will continue in the next 10 years. I don't see any significant change in the larger status quo. I
Mm-hmm.
think there will be ongoing greater conflicts in the next 10 years. The war in Ukraine will be spread across several, and they are not really wars about land and territory. There will be resource wars. There will be more climate change refugees. The nations that cause climate change that emitted upwards of 90% of all greenhouse gases that create global warming. And yes, global warming is very real. It's not a George Soros trick. It is a real phenomenon. Um, and more people who live in the tropics or in the so-called global south will have to retreat from their land into the global north, and the global north will become fortresses. Trump's wall will look like a good policy compared to what's coming. So there will be more climate disruption, further concentrations of wealth amongst the 1%, more and more Black people, especially those who consider themselves to be conscious or culturally conscious, will start to embrace more fascistic beliefs systems. I have a rather pessimistic view of the next 10 years, even though I'm doing everything I have the capacity to do to prevent these outcomes. I have to have a sober assessment of those potential outcomes. More wealth concentration, more environmental degradation, more animals will go extinct, more communities will be non-viable in terms of not being able, not only to be unable to grow and construct the things that they need due to climate change, they will also not be able to buy those things on the international market under capitalism, because this system, it does not exist to meet human needs. It exists to exploit human needs. So it's a rather pessimistic outlook, and I hope that inspires people to continue to struggle harder and struggle smarter. I'm not saying this to make anyone give up. It just means we need to intensify our efforts, we who seek liberation and a restoration of the world's ecosystems.
Okay. So I have another one here by Nandi. Yeah, Namdi sent another one. He says, Diallo, how do we deal with the people who has betrayed the African community, and what can we do to exile or get rid of the people who sold out? My.
Well, I developed the new Negro self-exposure protocol because Black people in the United States are a colonized people. We're an internal colony under hyper surveillance and oppression. Man, that barbecue tofu sounds, it was good, too
You're
good.
all right.
I didn't do enough chewing. Okay, the new Negro self-exposure protocol has certain steps. Black people, we do need an internal checks and balance system. Dr. Bobby E. Wright stated that Black people in the United States are the freest people in the world in one respect. And that respect is that as a Black person, you can conduct yourself in a way that violates the fundamental values and the material interest of the Black community, and the Black community cannot and will not sanction you. And you can't do that. Other races don't have that capacity. For example, two of the greatest Jewish scholars in the modern era are Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein.
Okay.
And nobody disputes the quality of their academics and research.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the Jewish state has barred them from coming to the country
Mm-hmm.
because those two Jews, whom I agree with and appreciate, go against the Zionist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been shunned. And they are called self-hating Jews, and most Zionist Jews don't rock with them in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's plenty other example. Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden was a Aryan wonder boy. He was a
Mm-hmm.
computer genius. He was part of the economic 1%, making over six figures a year. He was the man, but he acted in a way that was contrary to the interest of the elites in his own country. So he had to run with his ass on fire. And just a week ago, he was given full citizenship. He's considered a traitor. So every nation and every people who identify themselves as a people, who operate as a people, have a mechanism for identifying traitors, and they have policies and protocols for dealing with traitors. Some severe, some not. So I say that Black people need a self-exposure protocol. And by self-exposure means we don't have to make assumptions about where someone stands. I don't think this person's down for the movement, so I ain't rocking with him. Oh, he's an agent. So no one is allowed to make baseless accusations about anyone else. If I got on here and said something about Kanye and it can't be validated through evidence, then you should reject anything I say about Kanye. So self-exposure is when you go out and say white lives matter, or produce a shirt that says white lives matter. You go out and say slavery was a choice. You go out and embrace the enemies of our people, such as the MAGA movement. You go out and advocate for fascistic policies like restricting the right to abortion for Black women. You go out and you self-expose, then we can start to enact a protocol against you, because no one accused you, no one persecuted you. You made your hostility towards our community public. Then you expose them, you isolate them, and if possible, you expel. Exposure, put it out there in their own words, and let the world know, hey, this is this person's publicly stated position, or this is this person publicly exposed action. You expose, you isolate them, meaning that if they are in any way within your circle, whether they are in an organization with you, or whether they in your reading group, your knitting group, and you're a member of your church, you isolate them, meaning I'm not talking to this person. There's people I know in our community, I see them, I walk by, I don't even nod. You isolate them. And if you are in a power to, or if you're in a position to, you expel them. If you're not in a position to kick them out of the group, you just expose and isolate. And isolate also means, my wife, when she works out, she just has this random music player thing, whatever software she uses to play music. If a Kanye song comes on, she skips it. She'll skip it. I remember Dr. Bobby E. Wright said, in the 80s when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came out doing some Uncle Tom shit, if Kareem came on the TV, they turn it off. You watch the NBA, I watch all the NBA games except for games with Lakers. And that's not for that person. That's for your own self-respect, for your own solidarity, and what I call racial esteem, the esteem and the standard you hold your collective to. So it's the new Negro self-exposure protocol: expose, isolate, and expel. As we cultivate ourselves as a collective, as we have and construct more institutional power and engage in more statecraft, we can do more advanced sanctioning of traitors and enemies. But right now, this is something you can do as an individual, as a community, as an organization. And it is quite effective. So not only should we practice it, we should promote it along the larger community.
Okay. So, I know we have Wally up here. Let me just let you guys know. I see some new people come in. Simon, I see you. Hey, Simon. Taylor, hey, peace, sis. Thanks for passing through and showing some support. Once again, I will be posting Brother Diallo's link to his YouTube platform in the chat. So make sure you guys head on over there and subscribe to his channel. Hit the notification button so that you guys can get your notifications. If you are in my house right now and you have not wiped your feet, which means you have not hit the subscribe button, I am asking you to go back outside, wipe your feet, and come back. Okay, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you like what you're hearing, share it to your friends, your family, whoever you feel needs to hear this information. All right, so Wally, welcome to the platform. What do you have for us today? You have a question for Brother Diallo, or did you want to just expound on something you heard?
Right. Yeah. Morally to expound. How's it going, Hanitha? How's it going? You guys.
How you doing?
Right. So I'm glad she put up the core question of the generational wealth and just hearing your perspective on it, because every single time when I hear anyone ever spoke about wealth, previously, it's always interlining with this one thing, but there's really just a four-way factor, pinnacle of the whole thing of wealth, right? But looking at, just, and of course, understanding the whole passing of generational wealth and everything else. But my thing is like, even to this point, the whole passing of generational wealth, I mean, there's always been a point where even if you try, like, even if the generation before you have even tried to pass it, someone doesn't want to pick it up, right? Because if someone had a skill set and they try to pass that skill set, they're like, oh, no, I don't want to learn this skill. I'm planning on learning something else. And they totally abandon something that's able to help them longer beyond their time, even outside of the system itself. If they were to go like under the radar, right? So, in most cases, when we talk about generational wealth, most people are not even really aligning with it anyways, because they're banning any other thing that aligns with it in some cases. But just overall, because when I heard you earlier towards the guest, I don't really know how to say your name too properly, but to your own point of, when you say generational wealth, right? So I know you put a fragment of, you're saying like understanding the usability of, like understanding the environments and everything else of that, and holding those precious to keep a sustainable life, right? As far as overall. So this is my thing. So as far as for me, because I actually talk about wealth, right? So this is my 4 pillar components that I've seen in almost my time looking around and researching, and these are the 4 components that I've seen throughout my time researching.
Okay.
The wealth component is the financial, the social, the time, and the health. Do you agree with those, or do you have a distinction of one of them in there, or whatever you would say?
In terms of what wealth is, or the components of wealth?
Like these are the 4 components, right? Like the 4 main components, as far as I know for sure, right?
Yeah,
and I'm just saying, like,
I would add some others as well,
right?
Because if you have all those things,
so what would you add?
I would put above everything else ideology.
Ideology.
Above everything, financial, social, time, and health, I would put ideology.
Interesting.
In fact, I think ideology could stand alone without any of that. Not to say that they're not components, but if the ideology isn't in the right place, Obama with $1 billion is a much different outcome for African people than someone like Kwame Nkrumah with $1 billion.
That's true.
That's interesting, because I would say this with any type of structure, right? You do want to have an ideology that that sets the bar for it, right? So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so that makes sense to me as well. Yeah. Anything else, Wally?
No, that's it. That's what I wanted to come up here for, and just add that. Just asking those questions. But thank you very much for letting me up.
Yes, thank you for joining the conversation. All righty. You have a good one. Good weekend, Wally.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Diallo. We have a quick question. Did you use the term Uncle Tom at some point?
Yes, all the time. Uncle Tom, handkerchief head, buck dancing.
Okay, wait.
Shuffling, tap dancing.
There's a back and forth in the
Tom ass.
There's a back and forth in the chat right now about Uncle Tom. I don't know if you want to address that.
Listen.
Joining. She says Uncle Tom was the hero in the book. I wish there were more accurate messages in these spaces. Do you want to respond to that?
I don't, but I will, because I'm your guest.
Yes.
So I ain't going to, Here we go again. I've spoken and written on this. The reform and the restructuring of Uncle Tom actually started with Dr. Claude Anderson, because there was a book written by this elite white woman during slavery. What was her name? It was called Uncle Tom's Cabin. I can't even remember the. Beecher Stowe, Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was this old Karen It was a Karen who wrote a book about Uncle Tom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, she gave her white woman impression of what an ideal black man was and what a non-ideal black man was. So
Okay.
you had Sambo, who in the eyes of this Karen 1800s Karen, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and the ideal of this Karen, um, Sambo was shifty, he was dishonest, he was cantankerous and immoral, but he was still a slave. But then on the other hand, you had Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom was a noble black man. Uncle Tom was a forthright black man. Uncle Tom was the kind of man that this white woman would lay at night in her bonnet, in her plantation cabin, and just swoon over. So why the fuck would I give a damn about who Harriet Beecher Stowe says Uncle Tom is or what her idea of an ideal black person is? As this notion of an Uncle Tom, a noble black man who behaves himself, who speaks properly, stands upright, and conducts himself. There was a time where black people looked at this character as a heroic figure. But if you go to the time of the civil rights movement, where Uncle Tom evolved into an insult,
Mm-hmm.
you had men who wore suits and ties, who spoke respectfully and said, well, when we go out here and march, if a white man calls you a nigger, you look him in his eyes and says, you're my brother and I love you. If they throw stones at you, you cover your head, but you don't raise your fist. You let them spit at you and you don't strike back because we are dignified Negroes. And as King said, we're going to overcome the white man with the capacity to love. These dignified, respectable Negroes in suits. And their children said, I'm not wearing the bowl cut, I'm not wearing the suit, and I'm not taking a hit without hitting back. So I'm gonna grow this afro, I'm gonna put on this leather jacket, and I'm gonna say how I yearn to burn, baby, burn. Burn, baby, burn. And so in the black community said, let's forget about what this white woman wrote, and let's come up with our own cultural identity and our own cultural definitions. So people like members of the Black Panther Party, people like Malcolm X, said, this Uncle Tom respectable Negro never worked for us. We were respectable men who didn't cut our eyes at women and they still lynched us for rape and they know we didn't do. We wore suits and we still have to step off the sidewalk when a little white boy comes up the street and we have to stand in the mud. And so the concept of black, dignified blackness under oppression became something that was distasteful to us, being dignified and acting proper under oppression. So our ancestors, our ancient and our recent ancestors, in the form of Malcolm X, who probably most famously in his speech, what's it called, Message to the Grassroots, and in his book, Final Speeches of Malcolm X, said that it was a trick. The dignified, upright, noble Negro. Okay. Fuck that. I'm gonna talk how I want to talk, dress how I want to dress, and say what I want to say. So, as cultural fictional characters evolve and devolve over time, we are allowed to, as the people who had a white woman telling us and writing about us and writing about our experience, we're allowed to take that and change it as we see fit to suit our contemporary interests, outlooks, and values. So these people coming to me telling me about what Harriet Beecher Stowe, that white woman, wrote over 100 years ago while my ancestors was going through it, I don't care. So my definition of Uncle Tom comes from Malcolm X. My definition of what an Uncle Tom and who an Uncle Tom is comes from Khalid Abdul Muhammad. My idea of an Uncle Tom came from them indignant black men who said black power, who said you hit me, you smack me, I'm gonna smack you back, cracker. That's where my definition of Uncle Tom came from. If you want to honor Harriet Beecher Stowe's legacy by using Uncle Tom in the correct literary sense, go with God, who doesn't exist, and you do that. But leave me alone about Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom is not a hero in my book. I don't care what she put in her book. And I can't believe, and shame on Dr. Claude Anderson for even making us have to go about this. So you want to take that white woman's definition of what an Uncle Tom is, go with it. But I'm going to run with Malcolm X's definition of what an Uncle Tom is, handkerchief, head, boot licking, shuffling Negro is. So Uncle Tom is not a hero in my book. He's only a hero in that white woman's book.
Sound like a
It's
lot
just
of
like,
So go ahead.
no, Uncle Tom is a fictional character. I read comic books. There was a time when Batman was a detective. And so if there was a crime, Batman would come with a magnifying glass and he would dust for fingerprints and he would collect evidence. Batman was a detective. As time went on, he became a superhero. So instead of he come in with a batarang and beat the shit out of everybody. Fictional characters evolve in the culture. So when I say Uncle Tom, people know what it means. Bless your heart going to school. Bless your heart for reading the assignment. And bless your heart for getting a good grade in literature or whatever class you were assigned that book in. Bless your heart. And if the fact that you know that is fine, and the fact that you want to give that as a historical trivia is fine, but don't come out here and trying to reform the concept of an Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom is what it is, and we know what we mean when we say it. But you go tell that to your white friends, you go tell that to white folks, and they can be like, oh, this is such a lettered and learned Black person that understands what Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote so long ago. Forget her. I would say some other things, but
I'm just mad that you said letter. I'm sorry. So I know
now caveat. Now, if you came out with Okonkwo, and you talk about African literature and African heroes, so you take a book written by, I don't know, Zora Neale Hurston or Octavia Butler. Now, those characters are sacred. That's ours. We're not going to play with that with our end. We're not going to take the characters that Alec Baldwin gave us. But a character that some random white person wrote and we want to remix it, just like we did their language. Bad used to be bad and we turned bad into a positive. Why can't we do that with it? Somebody say, oh, sister, you bad. You go, well, do you know the original definition of bad? Or you going to say, thank you, bro? Or stop harassing me. I got business to say. Whatever you respond, you'll understand they're giving you a compliment. You're not going to turn around and be like, well, that's not what bad means. So we can remix their shit. We didn't want it. They forced it on us. And if somebody forced something on you, then you can do whatever you want to with it. You ain't got no obligation to treat it the way they want you to treat it. Don't force it on people if you don't want them to make it their own.
So I eventually want to get to what your alternative is to capitalism. But before I get there, I have to ask this question. Does capitalism and the parasitic nature of it and the way that Black people relate to capitalism, is that playing a part in the division amongst Black American right now with the reparations FBA?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yes, and so can you tell me how?
Well, when the reparations movement was first founded and integrated into the struggle by the group, shout out and respect to NCOBRA, shout out and respect to the National Black United Front, Conrad Royal, Dr. Conrad Royal, may he rest in peace, Bill Grace, but who now goes by the name Samori Grace. That movement was found to give Black people the resources to secure liberation from oppression. As the reparations movement devolved and individuals like the hustler pimp Tariq Nasheed and the self-hating Yvette Carnell came into it, they turned reparations into a movement that was meant to give Black people investment capital to further integrate into the systems and institutions of global white domination. Now, the reparations movement, the term reparations really means to restore people to the status that they were prior to the atrocity. That's what reparations meant. If African people were sovereign and self-determining people with their independent culture and outside from white hegemony and imperialism, if that's what it is, then reparations must be oriented towards returning us to that state of being. So it wasn't simply about money. Reparations did come with a dollar cost. But if you follow the revolutionaries who founded or formalized the reparations movement, Kwame Ture also included, you'll find that they also, as part of reparation, was an end to U.S. imperialism.
Yeah. Yep.
Was an end to hyper exploitation, economic exploitation, an end to the slum housing, slum and exploitative housing. It was a improve the healthcare. So reparations was a multifaceted agenda that went beyond uh, money, a dollar amount, and even went beyond the borders of the United States, because the reparations movement also united with the African decolonization movement, with the Caribbean Federation or the Caribbean consolidation movement. It was a one component of a much larger Pan-African liberation struggle. If you look at the contemporary ADOS and FBA reparations, they are literally trying to be made white. What they are saying to the United States is, if you give Black people this payoff, we will embrace the system. We will embrace the military, economic, and political agenda of the country. Yvette Carnell said, we want to be made white. What does it mean to be white? It doesn't just mean you can drive your car and not get nervous when the police get behind you. It doesn't just mean that when your house gets evaluated, they don't undervaluate your property that you own. It doesn't just mean you love Nutella and put raisins in potato salad. Whiteness is something much more insidious. Whiteness is the predatory exploitation of the non-white population. Whiteness is genocidal. Whiteness is omnicidal. The whiteness is treating the natural world as a disposable commodity. And so when a Black person said, make us white, like I said, they're not just putting Nutella on things, on everything, and raisins where they don't belong. That means they are contributing to destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the earth. So reparations has devolved and been corrupted. It is not just an economic struggle. It is political, social, cultural, and economic. And when you reduce it to the economic component, it just becomes a payoff. Pay us off for the destruction of our people. Don't make us whole, but pay us off. How much would you charge the rapist of your loved one to walk free? The murderer of your ancestors to walk free? How much would that cost you? A dollar amount, which is absurd.
Okay.
So I do support true reparations. I do not support what I call reparations is basically prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel says if you submit to this absurdist religion, if you honor God and follow the Bible, then you'll get reward, material rewards. And now they say, well, if you honor the capitalism and respect white hegemony, you'll get an economic reward as well. It's prosperity politics. It's not reparations or liberation.
Diallo, and so before I get to my next question, I'm just going to I'm going to stir the pot a little bit on the whiteness piece, because you just kind of went through what whiteness is, and I heard you talk on your platform, in reference to the Kanye West, wearing the white life, and Candace Owens wearing the White Lives Matter shirt, and you kind of went through what whiteness is. So to ask someone, does white lives matter? You're like, you broke it down like Irish lives matter, Italian lives matter, but whiteness, can you break that down for me?
Yeah, whiteness is a fiction. Whiteness, if you look at European history,
Okay.
there was no concept of whiteness until they started exploiting the non-white majority across the world. So whiteness is a necessity. Whiteness can only exist if white people dominate and unjustly rule over the rest of the world. The moment that white people lose their control over the world, they go back to being Irish, Polish, German, Roma. They go back to their various tribes and nationhoods and identity.
Okay.
But they created this blatant whiteness in order to orient and position themselves to hyper exploit the non-white.
Okay.
That's all it is. There's no such thing as white culture. There is a such thing as Irish culture. There's no such thing as white music, but there is a such thing as Irish or Scandinavian music or whatever. So the very concept, that's why when you say white pride, it is offensive. If someone came to you in a pub and on St. Patrick's Day and I'm a proud Irishman, you don't get offended. And you really don't need to be offended. That's their business. You might have your opinion about Irish culture, but who cares if you're proud to be Irish? Who cares if you're proud to be Polish? Who cares? I'm an Englishman. I'm a proud English. Who cares if you're proud and eat blood pudding and kidney pie? That's your pathetic business. But the moment you say white pride is an assault. White pride is a threat. White power is an assault. So the concept of whiteness only exists in that white people have undue power and influence over the masses of the people on the earth. That's where whiteness was born, and that's where whiteness continue. And that's when Yvette Carnell says, I want to be white, or Kanye makes a White Lives Matter shirt. That means they are traitors, and they're announcing their treason to their own people, and not just betraying humanity, but betraying, not just betraying Black people, but betraying all of humanity.
Okay.
You know, and many people, even white scholars, have said, number one, like Dr. Tom Hartman said, whiteness has been a plague. White people have acted more akin to a virus or a cancer in relationship to the rest of the world and other cultures. And for humanity to survive, whiteness must be obliterated. And the main place you have to obliterate it is from the mentality of people who identify as white.
That's true. So I know we're going to be wrapping up soon. So can you talk to me about what is your alternative to capitalism and why have you chosen? So in other words, when you envision Black people within an economic system, what does it look like to you? Even if you're not able to name it anything, what does that look like to you?
The reality is we don't need to really replace capitalism.
Okay.
To say you have to replace capitalism would mean that capitalism is necessary.
Okay.
You know, so if you have a food source and I take away your food source, you have to say, what are you going to use to replace it? Because I need food. If you have a water source and I take away your water source, and people are like, well, what are you going to replace my water source with? There is no need to replace capitalism. I just said capitalism is the method of concentrating the wealth of the masses into the hands of the elites.
Yes.
Why do we need a different way of doing that? We don't need to do that. We could just stop doing that.
Okay.
So a more appropriate question, not that I'm trying to tell you how to run your show,
You're fine.
how you need to do this, sister, but a more appropriate question would say is, what would be the result if we ended capitalism? What would be the outcome? Because I don't seek to replace. If we look at it, where does wealth come from?
Okay. Resources and that.
Right. Are the resources were there before capitalism?
Absolutely.
And who turns those resources into goods and services?
The people.
The people. The capitalist. Like I said, Jeff Bezos is a billionaire, right?
Yes.
He owns Amazon, right? Have you ever ordered from Amazon?
Yes.
Have you ever opened your door and saw Jeff Bezos standing there with a box?
No, sir.
Are the things in the box made by Jeff Bezos?
No.
Did you ever open any item that you bought from Amazon and look at the container and say made by Jeff Bezos?
No.
Do you imagine that Jeff Bezos is at the warehouse stocking the shelves?
Absolutely not.
Is he driving the truck or repairing the trucks?
None of it.
Is he on the freight ship shipping the shit across the world?
He is not involved.
What contract does Jeff Bezos do for Amazon?
Right.
Right. What does he do? And if Jeff Bezos, if I Thanos his ass and snap my finger and he turned to dust, what would happen to Amazon?
It might be taken over by somebody else.
Right. Yes, that's true. So it's a capitalism.
Yes.
But do you see how relevant Bezos is?
Right.
And you do that with any elite. You do that with any elite and you come to the same conclusion. What the fuck we need these motherfuckers for? What role do they play besides collecting all the money? And why are they able to get that money? What is the source of them? What is the justification for them getting that money? Did Jeff Bezos create the internet?
No.
Did he invent the internet? No. Who invented the internet?
I am not sure of the name
I'll
of the
tell you, it is DARPA. Socialism. The internet is a byproduct of socialism. Public money, public funding, publicly paid scientists and engineers. It was public, created the internet. The highway system that brings the packages to you. Did Jeff Bezos make that? Did Jeff Bezos invent package delivery?
Nope.
What the? Well, we obviously need Jeff Bezos, right? Well, let's go somebody else. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. Let's not just pick on Bezos. You know, he's the richest man in the world. Did he invent Tesla?
No.
Did he invent the battery?
No.
Did he invent electric cars?
No.
Then why does he get all the money from Tesla? Why does he get the lion's share of the money that comes in? He manufactures the cars? Did he design the car? What did he do?
That's a good point.
So I say we eliminate the capitalist. And if we eliminate capitalism and the capitalist, we have all these trillions of billions of dollars. And you know where the money should go? To those who make it possible.
Wait, Diallo, wait. How do we eliminate capitalism? What does that look like?
That looks like revolution. That's a whole nother thing. That looks like revolution. But just before we can even begin to organize ourselves to dismantle capitalism, we have to understand that we don't need it. A lot of people in this world think that, or in this country especially, I'm only have this iPhone because of capitalism. I'm able to work and buy my house because of capitalism. I'm able to give my kids a good education because of capitalism. But the reality is, and the historical record demonstrate, everything you value in this system was secured as a fight against capitalism. Child labor, did the capitalists support it, fight for it, or fight against it?
Against it.
Worker protections. So you can go to work and not be injured. You can go to work, and if you're injured, you get compensation. They have to give you safety gear, and they have to make sure the environment you work in does not kill or injure you. Did the capitalists fight for that or against that?
I would say against it.
Yes. The 8-hour workday, where your job couldn't say, well, you're going to work these 10 shifts or you're fired back to back. Did the capitalists fight for that or against it?
Against it.
Democracy. Your ability to have some say in how the environment you live in is governed, local government especially. Did the capitalists fight for or against that? Education being made available, mass education. Did the capitalists fight for it or against it? Healthcare. Do the capitalists fight for distribution of healthcare? Everything you think is good about being an American or being alive today, everything without exception. The capitalists were a obstacle to getting what the people need. The capitalists are our eternal bitter enemy. And if you're looking at this program, I would say 9 times out of 10, you are not a capitalist. Even if you believe in capitalism, even if you love in capitalism, even if you have delusion fever dreams about one day getting up there, hashtag Jay-Z, Beyonce goals. You are not yet a capitalist. And if you are not yet a capitalist, 90% of you who listen to me are going to die within the same class stratification that you were born in. Meaning that if you were born working class, you're 90% of the people born into the class will die in that class. So just from a logical, scientific, mathematic perspective, it is better for you to work collectively to uplift your class than it is for you to struggle individually to uplift yourself as an individual. You have better potential for success for class struggle and collective upliftment. Everywhere you go, the economy is socialist. Every economy is socialist. Every company is socialist. If you went to work and behaved like a capitalist, you would get fired by your capitalist boss. Because what would that mean? I am in competition with everybody around me. I'm going to hoard resources from everybody around me. Hey, Hanifa, can I get a stapler? No. I'm going to get all the staples. You got 15 staplers at your desk. You don't forward emails because there might be information in that email that is valuable. So I'm not going to forward emails. I'm going to print off every email and make it my intellectual property. If you behave like when you go to work, what do they say? We're a what? When you go to work in a company, what do they say? We are a...
I don't know.
A team.
A team, okay.
Or a family.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, if you have a good idea, share it. Let's share everything. Let's work together. Let's coordinate. Let's build each other up on our strengths and help each other where we're weak. That's socialism, right? And so capitalism It's not a system.
Okay.
Capitalism comes like you have all this socialistic cooperative work going
Correct.
on. And capitalism comes like a leech and sucks all that up into the top. If
Mm.
you remove that leech, the body would work better. It
Mm.
won't cut. If you go and find a shark, you ever seen shark documentaries and there's that little fish stuck to the side of the shark?
Yes. Yes.
If you remove that shark, it functions better. So capitalism does not produce wealth. Capitalism concentrates wealth.
Mm. Okay.
It is a wealth concentration system, not an economic system. Wealth is created communally. Even Michael Jordan, some people might say, well, Michael Jordan, you took all this shit. No, it's just Michael Jordan out there. Let's
Mm.
not even talk about his teammates who carried him.
Right.
But let's talk about the men who laid down that hardwood floor. The people in the sweatshops who manufactured the uniform and manufactured the sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
The people who went to the rubber plantation and got the rubber for the goddamn basketball. The people who cleaned up the stands after every game where people just throw shit on the floor and throw food so that when you go to the next game, it's not infested with vermin.
Mm-hmm.
The electricians who climb up on them Raptors to make sure the light's there. The cameraman, the promotional team. If all of that said, there would be no goddamn Michael Jordan. And let's forget about the people who worked in the sewers and worked in the water system so Michael Jordan could grow up and be strong, 6'8", man of power, so that he didn't grow up sickly, like if he was born in certain parts, if he was born in Haiti and being crippled and harmed and with parasites and malnutrition. We're not even going to talk about the people who work in the sewers, the electrician who helped build his house and maintain the electrical grid. So when he's playing in his mama's house and plugs in something, he doesn't get electrocuted and injured. All these people working together, coordinated, made it possible for Jordan to dunk that goddamn ball, to chase balls up and down the court.
Mm-hmm.
Why should he get all that goddamn money? He did not earn that money. He appropriated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care. You could love Jordan or love whatever singer, entertainer you want to love. If it's not for the network of people around, those people wouldn't be in a position to give. And that's what socialists understand.
Mm-hmm.
Wealth is communally created and should be justly distributed. That's all. That's the only thing we get when capitalism is gone. Look at the economy as a house,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The floor is the poor and working class people, right? Or the poor is the lowest income. Now, if you walk into a house, what's the type of house people hate living in the most? The basement.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really like because dank and flooding and this and that. So you have to have a floor in a house. You have to have a foundation for the house. That's
Okay.
the working class people. That's the people who make everything else possible in the society, right?
Yes.
That's the lowest income earners. What's the ceiling? That's the highest income earners.
Okay.
So let's say you built the most functional, immaculate house in the world, but you don't put a ceiling on it. What happens?
I mean, you get rained on.
And what happens after the rain comes and the snow comes and the winds come? What happens to the house?
It deteriorates at
The
some
most beautiful, functional house in the world, you don't put a roof on it.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to warp the floors,
Yes.
the walls, and the structure starts to crumble in and collapse on itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the capitalist economy. It has a floor, it has no ceiling. It has lower income, it has no upper income. There's no max. Everybody talking about minimum wage. If you don't have a maximum wage, minimum wage is absolutely irrelevant. They can make maximum wage like they can make minimum wage $1,000 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Since money, it's fiat money, it's printed money.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking now about the Fed, restricting the money pies. So we need a ceiling, and that's what socialism does. It puts a ceiling on that, a roof on the house.
Okay.
And that's what happens. What's happening right now, people stealing, people losing their minds many times, people out here acting in very irrational ways. That's the society. Because there's a floor in the house, but there's no roof. So as things start to warp and crumble, what do the capitalists come and say? Well, let's put a roof on that house. Let's take some of this $1 billion that I don't need and redistribute it. What do they come and do? They come in and with hammers and nails trying to repair. And what's the hammer and the nail? The military and the police,
Mm.
the fascists.
Mm.
So you got a warped house, and you got all these people who are analogous to the police in that house, putting up all these support beams and hammering all and trying to bang the floorboards back down, flatten out, and just beating up that house and making it look even more chaotic than it would have been if they weren't there. When all we have to do is put a cap on this mother. And that's what I say. We don't need to replace capitalism because we are under the illusion. People go to work every day saying, oh, thank God I got this job. And if it wasn't for Bezos, no, Bezos should be thanking you. You are the one who made Bezos. We made Trump. I already started off saying, if you show Trump a hammer and a wrench, would he even be able to tell the difference? But he's a builder? I even see people say, Trump's a builder, so he can save the country. What has Trump ever built?
Mm. Mm.
All he does is put his name on building, and this is where their power lies. This is where their power is. Whether this is a deed, this is because 80% of all rich people inherited their money. But whether this is a deed, whether this is a dollar bill, whether this is a writ of sale, all it is this, the divine right of kings. The king would walk out, except it be a scroll. On this paper is the document saying that I am the supreme sovereign monarch. And we were like, whoa, that's all it is. It's just on paper. If we would just stand up. But that's why there are other elements to capitalism, such as that we can't get into because I know I want to respect time. Propaganda, mass indoctrination, several divide and conquer tactics where people don't even know who they are. We got pro-black, conscious black people out here embracing fascism, thinking they're doing something on behalf of black people. So there's a lot of other elements to it, but that's basically it. I wouldn't replace capitalism. I would expel it from our lives, and it doesn't need a replacement.
So here's what I'm gonna say. So my audience loves you. I love the conversation. I am going to bring you back so we can talk about those different factors of capitalism because I do think they need to be broken down. Because I think that people are aware that there's something diabolically wrong with capitalism, but sometimes we're not able to pinpoint exactly what it is. And so I definitely want to bring you back for that.
Okay.
Would you be willing to come back?
Absolutely. Just let me know.
Okay, so we have one question for you.
Okay.
Did all of those people did all those people doing all those jobs do so with the social intention to create Michael Jordan, or did they do so to get paid? Markets organize the profit for their labor to produce MJ.
They did it to get paid, so that answers the first part. They did it to get paid. Markets organize the profit from their labor to produce. I don't know what he means. Markets don't organize profit. What does that mean? Markets. Market is not self-directed. That's like, oh, the market did this. The market is another fictional thing where they talk about the invisible hand of the market. Those are more fictions like the divine right of kings. All I was arguing is, how do we determine who deserves what? Is Michael Jordan chasing a ball more important than the people who laid down the floors and put together the surrounding infrastructure? I don't think that Michael Jordan shouldn't get paid. I'm saying Michael Jordan shouldn't get paid $1 billion. I don't think anyone has earned $1 billion. And so the people making the Jordan shoes, you took Michael Jordan's Uncle Tom ass and take him into a shoe factory. Would he be able to produce a shoe for you? Can Michael Jordan make a goddamn shoe? No. The answer is no. Why do the people who make his shoes suffer from debilitating disease, from inhaling the toxic fumes from the manufacturing process? Why do the people who make Michael Jordan shoes receive stress fractures and other repetitive motion injuries? Why do the people who make Michael Jordan's shoes not be able to afford health care when they get injured at these horrible jobs? Why do the people who make Michael Jordan shoes not receive pensions or when they retire? Why do their children not get tuition and basic health care? Why do they not have adequate housing? The people who make those goddamn shoes, why not? Are they more important than Jordan? Are their lives more valuable than Jordan? Are their children's lives less valuable than Jordan's children's lives?
Right.
And so you get caught up in the fact of his name on the shoe. That's the least relevant component of the fucking shoe.
Mm.
That's the least. He should get paid the least for every shoe sold.
Mm.
And then the second step, that's the first step of exploitation, sweatshop labor and ecocidal business practices. And then you bring it here, a shoe that costs $16. Not just $16 to make, because the materials going into that shoe are sometimes $3 to $4.
Mm-hmm.
But the $16 counts the manufacturing, the packaging, the shipping, the stocking, and sales of that shoe. All that $16. Why the blood clot would Jordan get 8 of every $16 or however it breaks down?
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you can get a functioning human brain to think that that's acceptable, by the time you get there, then you're dealing with someone who has been dehumanized, someone who has been miseducated, that their very value system is warped.
Yes.
If you think Michael Jordan deserves, well, he did it, he chased them balls. If you believe that, then your value system is greatly warped. And you ever look back, you look at a history show, and you see people killing witches, and those people were crazy back then.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how primitive humans, if we survive long enough and capitalism doesn't completely lead to our extinction, which is what the path we're on, our descendants, talk about generational wealth, our descendants will look at us like they were insane, primitive people. Because the very standards that we're willing to live by and it's the conditions that we're willing to just acquiesce and accept to any more advanced humans will look absolutely insane. Will look as crazy to us. We'll look as crazy to future advanced civilizations as the Neanderthals eating bone marrows of their dead ancestors look to us.
Mm-hmm.
Or as Dale Jones saying, if you're not pissed off and want to break something, you're not even human. You're being so dehumanized that you just accepted the status quo.
Okay. All right. Whew. Okay. So I definitely am going to bring you back for a part 2. But before you leave, you talked about value systems, miseducation. Do you have any book recommendations for people who want to educate themselves around this system of capitalism and what makes it so parasitic? Do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah, I think that the thing is, capitalism is white as fuck. It's an extremely white thing. That is some white, like I said, it is the Nutella or the mayonnaise of economic systems. It's very white.
Okay.
And Black people, we often feel down about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We often feel down about ourselves because we don't achieve in capitalism.
Mm.
Black people, we suck at capitalism. And a lot of our gurus will come and tell us and shame us for that. They will come and attack us. But I think as long as we continue to suck at capitalism, there'll be hope for us. To me, it is a validation of our humanity, the fact that we're not as good as capitalism. People go, what's wrong with Black people? The problem with us is that we still have what they call an instinctive love of justice. So we'll never be able to collectively achieve under capitalism, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so I thoroughly believe and think that, my grandma told me a long time ago, it takes one to know one. So if you want to really understand capitalism, you have to look at white folks. I really do respect several authors that talk about capitalism, but you got to go back to the basics. You got to read Wealth of Nations, and you got to read the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto, if you read that in 2022, you would swear the book was written yesterday, even though it was written well over a century ago. And it's not even a book, it's a pamphlet.
Okay.
And you need to read Adam Smith. You need to read, and I'm not even going to go and say read Jean-Jacques Rousseau and all these other, European philosophers. Really, you got to. Okay, don't read them. Okay, read those 2 books, but go read Urugu.
Yes.
Because she herself went back and did some of this stuff. So you don't have to go read Plato and all these other insane men in togas and they're, because she kind of broke that down. So I'll save you some reading. Read the Communist Manifesto.
Uh-huh.
Read it. And black people hate Marx. Oh, like Marx. And I'm like, what did Marx, like, why would you hate Marx? He gave us one of the most, dialectical and historical material. But again, you're not going to find anything out about black people reading Marx. You're going to find out about white people. He snitched on his people. That's why he got stitches. Marx is hated. If you got a white person you work with, and you really want to hurt that white man, don't slash his tires or key his car. He'll just get a better car with the money they stole from us. Call him a Marxist. All the white people. Like, yeah, boy, yeah. It's like, oh, get out of my face, you Marxist. That white man will cry into he'll go home, take off all his clothes, get in a fetal position in the kitchen. His wife will have to scoop him off the floor. Call a white man a Marxist. Why is that? Why do the average white person hate Marx so goddamn much?
Is it worse than being called a racist to them?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yes. I'm telling you, I've done this. I've tried this experiment. They don't even have to do anything remotely Marxist or say they could be a right-wing ultra conservative. And I'll tell you, it'll make them change how they act. That's the worst thing you get, more than a racist, please. They'll be like, oh, I'm shocked. How dare you call me a racist? They'll go to the bar or the pub that night and get high fives. I got called a racist today. They be in there dabbing and that awkward dab they do. Because they still dabbing. They can't keep up. So, read Marx.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody that white folks, Dr. Bobby Wright said, anytime all white folks are against you, you're doing something right. So read Marx, read Adam Smith, just for a foundation. Because a lot of black people loving something, they don't even know what they love. This is great. And so, but read Urugu.
Okay.
Read Black Labor, White Wealth.
Okay.
So, read this. If we got to talk about the black people, because I'm going to do a book review of this. So you can read it, or read
the Black Bourgeoisie. Okay.
The Negro of Capitalism. And I'll just leave it there. I could just be here naming books all night.
Yeah.
The goddamn Communist Manifesto. I am not a Marxist. I am a scientific socialist in the vein of Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. So I would more accurately say I'm a Touréist. But damn, that goddamn barbecue. Tofu.
You're fine.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm gonna close out here because I'm not gonna keep you too much longer. First of all, I want to say I appreciate the conversation. I'm definitely gonna bring you back.
Can I recommend one more book? I'm so sorry.
Sure.
Endgame by Derek Jensen.
Endgame?
Yes. Endgame by Derek Jensen. Okay. Don't go look up Derek. Just buy the book. Don't look him up because he done lost his mind too. That's another thing about critical thinkers. If I lose my mind, then you got to cut it off. Like, don't listen to nothing Diallo said after 2023 because the brother went crazy. You see me sitting up here with a Kardashian and I got $1 billion. I go the brother polite route and I'm standing there in front of Maseratis. Sometimes, you gotta. Up to this, because Derek Jensen, when he wrote that book a decade ago, was on point. Right now, he's gone a little crazy.
Okay.
Critical thinkers and the struggle will get you there.
Okay.
So don't Google him and look up anything current.
Okay. So that's
it's the same thing with Claude Anderson. Don't look up Claude Anderson today. Stick with the stuff that came out 20 years ago.
I saw a recent interview with him and I had a lot of question marks after listening.
You're not listening. I told you 20 years. Claude Anderson, Dr. Dick Gregory said they would kidnap our people and put chips. He's like, he'd been chipped. So
yeah, I see what you're saying because I saw the interview and I had a lot of questions. But
bless his heart.
Brother Diallo, thank you so much.
Right, thank you.
I will reach out again because I do want to bring you back and do a part 2. It might be between in the next 2 weeks actually. I'm gonna send you an email, and if you can, we'll make an arrangement to bring you back. So I'm gonna call it part 2 because I want us to go over the different components as far as capitalism goes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you so much.
And thank you so much for inviting me and for your efforts to make a positive contribution to the just aspirations of African people.
Thank you. You enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, you too.
Okay.
Can I press the X now or do?
Yeah, you can. I can remove you.
Oh no, I don't want to. If I have to, at the interviews, people be looking awkward at the end, like,
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is remove you
I don't know,
first.
that awkward moment at the end. You don't know what to do. I don't want to just cut you off.
No, I'm
I'll
gonna
sit here.
remove you.
I'll
And
sit here and look awkward until you remove me.
okay, alrighty. All right, guys. Let me know if you guys enjoyed that. We're gonna bring Brother Diallo back. I'm hopefully gonna try to bring him back in the next 2 weeks. And we can expound on this or build on this particular conversation that we just had together. And I thought it was a really good conversation. I enjoyed the questions that you guys brought forth. And I already, this is why I brought Brother Diallo on to talk about this topic because I know that he's very passionate about it. And he is not getting caught up in the emotionalism of it all. And, so you guys let me know if you guys enjoy the conversation in the comment section. You could catch the replay and just let me know. Let me know what you enjoyed most about the conversation. Let me know what your takeaway was. And send me some of your questions that you guys may have for Brother Diallo on the next go round because I'm probably going to bring him back in the next 2 weeks. I want to say thank you guys for sticking it out with us, having the conversation with us, engaging. Shout out to Wally for coming up. I want to say shout out to Darren if he's listening. Thank you for the Cash App. I appreciate you, my dear brother. Thank you for the support. Yeah, and until next time, guys, I'm just gonna say peace and blessings and enjoy the rest of your weekend and get some of those books that Brother Diallo mentioned as well. Until next time, guys, peace and blessings.